Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we crack open dense sources, we pull out the knowledge you need, and deliver those surprising insights that turn really complex subjects into fascinating conversations.
And today we are diving deep into a spiritual tradition that has, well, it's really captured the attention of the modern West like few others. Buddhism. It's often misunderstood, sometimes a little oversimplified, but at its heart, it's one of the most systematic, pragmatic approaches to human happiness ever devised.
That pragmatism is so key. We're unpacking a really comprehensive chapter on the tradition covering its origins, its core philosophy, and, its real-world relevance.
Right.
Our mission is to understand why this 2,500-year-old framework is suddenly the toolkit of choice for so many people looking for genuine meaning today.
What stands out immediately, and what I find so radical, is the emphasis on direct personal experience. The historical Buddha. He didn't ask for blind faith.
No.
He actively encouraged his followers to accept the truth or the Dharma only if it really worked for them. Personally, it's like an invitation to test a hypothesis.
It's spiritual empiricism, basically. If you apply the methods and you're still suffering, you're free to just discard it.
Exactly.
And speaking of suffering, that is the central problem Buddhism is trying to solve. The core goal is to end suffering, or dukkha, and attain happiness, but, and this is crucial, this happiness is achieved through a kind of profound spiritual realization, not by accumulating more stuff.
It's a journey from this deep-seated dissatisfaction, which is really the definition of dukkha, to a lasting internal peace. And that whole journey begins with a pretty dramatic origin story.
Okay, so let's rewind. We're going back 2,500 years to ancient India. The story starts with Siddhartha Gautama, born around 563 BCE in what is now modern-day Nepal.
And he wasn't born poor or anything. He was born into immense privilege, part of the Kshatriya caste, the rulers, the warriors.
It's elite.
Absolutely. The sources paint his birth as, well, miraculous. The legend says his mother, Queen Maya, conceived him after a majestic white elephant came down from heaven and entered her womb. So this birth heralded a great future, but there was a prophecy. He would either become a great world ruler or a great spiritual redeemer.
And his father, King Suddhodana, he really wanted the ruler option badly. So he creates this artificial world for his son.
A bubble.
A total bubble. Siddhartha was kept entirely within the palace walls, surrounded by luxury, music, beautiful things, specifically to stop him from ever encountering suffering and, seeking a religious life.
Right.
He married Princess Yasodhara, had a son named Rahula, and lived a life that was designed to be one long, beautiful distraction.
But you can't suppress reality forever, right? It just doesn't work. When Siddhartha was 29, curiosity finally drove him out of the palace, and he encountered what are now known as the legendary Four Sights.
And these four encounters just shattered his gilded cage. He first saw an old man, then a sick man, and then a corpse. The reality of old age, sickness, and death, these unavoidable facts of life, it just hit him like a physical blow.
His perfect world was a lie.
Totally. But the final sight, that's what provided the answer. He saw an ascetic monk. And this monk, despite having nothing, had this serenity, a peace that the prince, with all his wealth, had never felt.
That was the catalyst.
At 29, he makes the ultimate sacrifice. He leaves his life, his family, his inheritance. He shaves his head, puts on a simple yellow robe, and just sets out to find a permanent solution to suffering.
And he didn't ease into it either. His initial quest took him to the absolute extreme of self-denial. For 6 years, he practiced this radical asceticism, believing that inflicting pain and denying the body would somehow liberate the mind.
The sources are pretty explicit about how extreme this got. At one point, he was eating, like a single grain of rice a day? He became emaciated, almost died. He pushed his body to the absolute limit.
And the crucial takeaway here is that this extreme suffering was a failure. It proved that self-mortification only added to dukkha. It didn't get rid of it.
That failure was his greatest breakthrough.
It was. He realized that avoiding the extremes, both the palace's crazy luxury and the starving ascetic's denial, was the only real path. He accepted some food, got his strength back, and this became known as the middle way.
So not too much, not too little.
Exactly. He then sat in meditation under a fig tree, now called the Bodhi tree, and achieved this complete, profound understanding of reality. He achieved enlightenment. He became the Buddha, the enlightened one.
And what did that actually get him? What is nirvana? We use that word so casually.
Right. In the Buddhist context, it means supreme liberation. It's a state of spiritual peace and the complete end of that endless, messy cycle of rebirths. the cycle we call samsara.
It's important to say he didn't just die after this. He lived and taught for decades.
For decades, but upon his death in 486 BCE, he achieved what's called parinirvana, the final complete release from the cycle, the permanent exit from suffering.
His life's work really began right after his enlightenment with his first sermon. This is where he laid out his core teaching, the Dharma, the guide, the truth. And this is where the philosophy gets incredibly detailed and incredibly useful.
Absolutely. Before we even get to the famous truths, we have to understand the foundational reality the Buddha described. The three characteristics of existence. These are the three fundamental facts about reality that, well, they cause us so much grief when we ignore them.
Okay, so what's the first one?
The first is anicca, which is impermanence, the idea that everything is in constant flux. The source material really emphasizes this. Your job, your body, your emotions, nothing stays the same.
And the second one is probably the hardest one for modern listeners to get their head around. Anatta, the doctrine of no self.
Oh, it's a huge one. It means there is no permanent, independent, unchanging self or soul sitting inside you, directing traffic. You're just a collection of ever-changing parts, thoughts, feelings, sensations that all flow together like a river.
Wait, hold on. If there's no permanent self, that sounds terrifying, a little chaotic.
Yeah.
If I'm not a fixed me, then who's responsible for what I did yesterday?
That's the critical challenge Anatta presents and why it's so revolutionary. The actions, the karma, are real, and the consequences of those actions stick with the stream of consciousness, but the subject doing the action is constantly changing. The suffering comes from grasping onto the illusion of a permanent self.
I see. So we create this fixed idea of me, and then when the world inevitably changes, that me struggles and suffers. Which brings us to the third characteristic, dukkha.
Exactly. Dukkha is the reality of suffering or dissatisfaction. And it exists precisely because we try to cling to things that are anicca impermanent, using an idea of a self that is anatta, which is, well, not really there in a fixed way. That conflict is the source of our dissatisfaction.
So that whole framework sets up the Four Noble Truths, which is the famous diagnosis and prescription for the human condition.
Right. The first truth is the noble truth of suffering, dukkha. To live is to suffer. And this isn't just, obvious pain or grief. It's also the subtle suffering that comes from disappointment or being separated from what we love.
And the second truth is where the analysis gets super focused. The noble truth of the origin of suffering. It says very clearly that suffering comes from craving, from selfish desire.
It's that desire to cling to things that are impermanent, or the desire for things to be different than they actually are.
What's so fascinating is the third truth, the noble truth of the cessation of suffering. If desire is the cause, then the end of suffering is totally possible just by ending that desire. The solution is right there in the diagnosis.
It is. And the fourth truth gives us the how. It's the noble truth of the path to the extinction of suffering. And that way out is to follow the Noble Eightfold Path. It's the blueprint.
The blueprint for life. It's often shown as the Dharma wheel, right? And it's a practical structure divided into three areas: wisdom, ethical conduct, and mental development.
It's a daily guide, not just some abstract philosophy.
Let's focus on the ethical conduct part because the instructions are so specific. Take right livelihood. You have to abstain from jobs that cause harm.
Right. This means avoiding anything that directly inflicts violence. Our sources list things like no trading in weapons, no slaughtering animals, and even abstaining from charging crazy high interest rates, what they call usury, because it exploits people.
It sets a really high bar. And similarly, right conduct means living non-violently, honestly, just morally in all your interactions.
And for the layperson, people who aren't monks or nuns, there are the 5 precepts. These are the basic rules.
Foundational stuff.
Foundational. Abstain from killing or harming any living being. That's ahimsa. Abstain from stealing, sexual misconduct, false speech, and intoxicants like alcohol or drugs that cloud your mind.
And all of these actions, good and bad, they feed into this concept of karma. This isn't divine judgment, right? It's more like a principle.
Exactly. It's simply the principle that your thoughts and actions determine your fate, leading to future lives or rebirths. Karma is the engine that drives samsara.
So if you're drawn to this path, the first formal step is taking the 3 refuges, or the triple jewel. You state, I go to the Buddha for refuge. I go to the Dharma for refuge. I go to the Sangha for refuge.
And that sana, the community, is hugely important. It's what kept these teachings alive. But the tradition didn't stay as one single thing. It branched into some incredibly different schools of thought.
Right, the great divergence, the split between Theravada and Mahayana.
So Theravada, the way of the elders, is sometimes called Southern Buddhism. It's the dominant form in places like Sri Lanka and Thailand.
In Theravada, the ideal person is the arhat. This is someone who achieves enlightenment for themselves. The path is really rigorous, usually monastic, and the Buddha is seen as a master teacher, a guide, but not really a savior.
But then you have Mahayana, the greater vehicle, which is Northern Buddhism. This is what's prevalent in China, Korea, and Japan. And this is a huge philosophical shift. Well, the ideal in Mahayana is the bodhisattva. And this is a radical idea. The bodhisattva is someone who achieves enlightenment, but then chooses to be reborn back into the pain of samsara.
To help everyone else.
To help all other suffering beings. It shifts the focus from just your own liberation to this universal compassion. And so the Buddha is often seen more as a divine being, a savior figure. It's a massive difference.
And we also see the very colorful and symbolic world of Vajrayana or Tibetan Buddhism, famously associated with the Dalai Lama.
Right. This tradition uses a lot of visualization tools, mandalas, and the repetition of sacred phrases called mantras.
And then there's Zen Buddhism, which is extremely popular in Japan. This is the Insight School. It focuses almost exclusively on intense meditation and trying to achieve a kind of sudden, spontaneous enlightenment, or satori.
And the methods Zen uses are notorious, especially the koans.
Ah, yes, the irrational riddles, like the famous, what is the sound of one hand clapping?
It sounds like intellectual torture, doesn't it? But the point of the koan isn't to get a logical answer. It's designed specifically to short-circuit your rational dualistic mind. You struggle with it so intensely that your ordinary mental process just collapses.
And in that moment of frustration,
that's where you can have a sudden non-linear flash of insight, the satori. It's about forcing the mind outside the box of its own making.
And these complex philosophies are often helped by visual tools, which we see everywhere in Buddhist art.
Yeah, the symbols are crucial. We mentioned the Wheel of Life, which visually maps out the entire messy cycle of samsara.
And those incredible, intricate mandalas. These are geometric maps, often built so painstakingly from colored sand, used as visual aids in meditation. And then they're destroyed.
And their destruction perfectly symbolizes anicca, impermanence. Even this sacred map of the cosmos is transient. It's a powerful lesson. You also see mudras, the symbolic hand gestures in Buddha statues that convey specific states of mind, like teaching or fearlessness.
So moving into the modern era, the reach of these teachings is just enormous. Globally, we're looking at an estimated 350 million followers.
And it's still highly concentrated in Southeast Asia. I mean, 95% Buddhist in Thailand, 90% in Cambodia.
But we also see that growing interest in the West, particularly in North America, with Buddhist centers offering everything from deep monastic study to just simple secular meditation classes.
Right.
And as these spiritual movements cross geopolitical lines, they sometimes clash with state power. Our sources highlight the very sensitive conflict involving Falun Gong in China, and we have to report these differing viewpoints impartially.
Okay, so on one side, Falun Gong is presented as a peaceful spiritual movement. It's based on meditation, physical exercises, and moral principles rooted in Buddhist ideas. They see it as a purely spiritual practice.
But on the other side, the Chinese government views the organization as a highly structured, reactionary political force. Because of its huge membership and its cohesive community, its Sangha, the government perceives it as a destabilizing factor.
The government's view is that it could be used by external forces to challenge the Communist Party's control, and this has led to severe persecution.
What this situation really shows us is the inherent power of that spiritual cohesion. When a philosophy based on shared principles and community, the Sangha becomes large and influential, it can get tangled up in politics, regardless of its original intent.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
It brings us back to the entire structure of the tradition. Whether you see Buddhism as a religion, a philosophy, or a psychological system, it offers this remarkably systematic, step-by-step way to confront and manage suffering. And it doesn't ask you to believe, it asks you to try it.
It's the ultimate practical philosophy. It lays out the problem, tells you exactly why you have it, and gives you a detailed daily path to eliminate it.
Exactly. So as we wrap up, let's go back to that key radical idea we unpacked. Anana, the truth that there is no permanent fixed self. If our deepest suffering, both professional and personal, comes from clinging to this idea of a fixed identity, a permanent me, that reality itself keeps dissolving. How might your whole approach to your next major challenge change if you begin by questioning your own fixed self-identity, by allowing that identity to be fluid and impermanent?
The ability to let go of who you think you are. Well, that's the very definition of liberation.
Indeed. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.